Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second meeting of this austere, august group. I don't know if we're austere, but we're certainly august. We'll see how austere we are. Let's do just a quick once more introductions. No long biographies, who you are, where you work. I'm Charlie from Visit Fargo Moorhead.
Mallory, also Visit Fargo Moorhead.
Emma McIntyre, Folkways.
Joe Raso, Greater Fargo Moorhead EDC.
Denise Kolpak, City Commission.
Tim Mahoney, Mayor.
Susan Thompson, City of Fargo Finance.
Jim Gilmore's Fargo staff.
Mike Redlinger, City Administrator.
Dave Pepcorn, Fargo City Commission.
Taylor Snelling, owner of Mezzaluna.
Ken Kolstad, President, Livewire.
Claire Hughes, Clubhouse Hotel and Suites.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I have one additional piece of business just to point out that Commissioner Pepcorn brought up as I walked in the building today. Some of you, he got a call this week from a developer. Some of you may get calls from developers asking about this process. You can certainly refer them to me if you want. Other than that, you probably shouldn't engage in any long kind of banter with them because we're so early in the process. Usually what I tell them when they call, same thing even before this committee was formed, is that here's what we're hoping to do after the vote passed. These are just guesses at this point, but kind of, perhaps educated guesses. And so stick around. We'll let you know when the RFP is out there. So thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner. They're always, people are always looking for information. So that's good. I spoke to one earlier this week. It's probably the one who called you or emailed you. Michael got it too and sent it to me. And then he called me while I was in Minneapolis. So I called him back and I said, it'll come out eventually. Oh, look, there's Eric. Eric, introduce yourself. Hello.
Hi, Eric Johnson, Assistant City Attorney. Do you hear me?
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, so first, the second thing on the agenda was review comp set renderings. We didn't actually bring those with us. We did bring some with us. No, we didn't. They're going to be on our website. We're working on a page on our website, which will still be under Convention Center, but the marketing team is working on it. We've identified a few building concepts, existing floor plans and stuff like that, just to throw on there for you to get a look at it, including the ones from Rochester and St. Cloud. I also found one for Dubuque, Iowa. What else? Was there another one that we put in there? Bismarck. I think we're going to put Bismarck in there. If it isn't already, we'll put it in there. And just so you can see what those look like, so they'll be up there along with other information on that page as well. And that you'd find at Visit Fargo Moorhead, which is fargomoorhead.org is our website. And look for Convention Center on there and you should be able to find it without too much trouble. It's a work in progress at the moment, but I think by next week we'll be in pretty good shape. Okay, we want to talk a little bit about the required square footage discussion before we're going to zero in on catering kitchen because that came up last week. So we invited a couple of our catering pals to come and discuss that with us to give us a little more insight into what kinds of space and equipment needs they might want. But first we want to talk a little bit about required square footage. We talked about that last week, and I've been pretty regular in saying all along since before the two votes even that we need a big room that's hopefully 50,000 square feet, certainly at least 40,000 plus, that could be dividable in two. I've had some discussions with others who think you could divide that up into like ballroom space and then exhibit space. But then we also had some discussion this week about the multi-purpose nature of it. Some people say that the guys at HVS suggested that might be a drawback in some way. I'm having trouble finding that to be a drawback, really. And in fact, it may be more of a plus. Kent, I know you got the email, and Mallory and I received an email from a fellow who used to work at a facility in town. It was known as, it's the Avalon now, but it was known as Playmakers and then the Hub for a while. And he talked about how there's no venue in town for a concert like that right now, and then if we wanted to have maximum flexibility and use of the building, we might want to consider keeping that and maybe even adding a mezzanine on it, which would be something to consider. So that would also fit along with the idea of if we ever wanted to do like cheer team or dance or that kind of thing in there. So I think we still are looking at one big room that's dividable into ballroom and convention space. Kent's company did the AV for the Minnesota Tourism Conference this week, which I happened to be at. And we were in a room, so that room you told me later was that we were in half of a room that was about 28,000 square feet, right?
That's correct, yeah, so it'd be about double the size that you saw.
Yeah. So so the half was, 14, about the size of the Crystal Ballroom, probably, right? So that room could be double that. So they have various spaces, of course, in that large building that are all dividable, but it was just an example of the kind of things you could do, and it looked fine for a general session. That one had a stage in it. Give me your impression of the stage. You didn't think we need that, right?
The stage that they have at the Minneapolis Convention Center Ballroom is a built-in stage. So it's a theatrical proscenium stage, very permanent in nature. Pros and cons on all sides of that. We were able to utilize it very well for the Explore Minnesota Tourism Conference and other events that we produced there. But customizing the layout of the facility for different types of events becomes very limited in that way. So yeah, it's great for that purpose. And in this case, the Minneapolis Convention Center has, hundreds of thousands of square feet alongside the ballroom for other types of events and purposes. So they have the ability to have a permanent stage without it really impacting them. For our purpose, and as we think about facilities surrounding us, and so many of the facilities that we're discussing, we can still create a ballroom-style event and create that overall look and feel without having a permanent built-in stage. So we eliminate some cost as a result of that, and we can customize that layout, right? We could have a stage on any wall of a venue or in a corner and that type of thing in a multi-purpose room.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So, yeah, I tend to agree. I don't think we'd want to build a stage into one end of it because we can always add that. And none of the existing meeting space in town has a built-in stage anyway. So, well, except for the Civic Auditorium had a stage built in. So those are just some of the things we want to think about. The mezzanine idea, I don't have a good concept in my head of how that works or how that would be constructed, but we can certainly see if anybody we could include that as a possibility, right?
My 2 cents on that, you could easily build in a mezzanine that maybe has additional seating for, say, a concert-style event. It could be a great opportunity for maybe a nonprofit gala for like VIP seating, something to that effect. It could be great for vendors, trade show usage, that type of thing. So all depends on how it's built. Does it have the ability to be opened up and shut off from the main room space, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Good possibility, though, for sure.
And it seems to me a lot of this is more toward the final design aspect of it once we get down to narrowing, perhaps, after we've looked at some proposals and see what can be done with them.
2 quick cents on the mezzanine thing. I don't think it's a need necessarily. It would be a nice to have, for sure. Yeah.
Well, you could still do a 3,000 person concert in a room that size. This is how it came up. There's a shortage of space. There's not a space right now for a 2,500 to 3,000 attendee concert, which has been brought to my attention before by other promoters in town. We have some that work. We have Blue Stem in Moorhead, but we don't really have any indoor facility like that right now. And I think they're thinking more in terms of concerts for much younger people than me. Although I can stand through a whole concert, I can. But mostly it's people who don't necessarily want seating in there at all, or at least not on the main level. They want to have, want to be able to stand up and dance and so forth. So and that was the niche that the hub fulfilled at one time. And the Civic Auditorium used to do that too a lot. So we'll see how that goes down the road. Any other thoughts? Anybody want to jump in with any thoughts before we go to the catering discussion about size or anything?
Yeah, as we're planning square footage, I know we clearly have a target audience for this space. So you guys have identified certain styles of conferences that you would like to have in the convention center, to the note of types of events that we can promote in the convention center. I do think it would be interesting to get an outside feedback, whether it's like a survey of individuals that would be potential customers, to understand how they would best utilize the space, because they are the end user. I don't know if you guys have done feedback surveys like that before, if we have information maybe within the last 10 years.
So one of the things that, like Charlie just referenced, that landing page that will be sharing more information, a lot of the documentation that I have referenced in here are inquiring leads that have, asked about Fargo as a host destination that we cannot and have already declined. A lot of those, that's just looking at for instance, like the breakout space, like most of them are 8 to 12 breakout rooms. And, just kind of going through like the actual data of clients that have reached out to us in, I don't know, I would say this is probably the last 8 years since we started kind of collecting this. So using this as kind of a jumping off point.
And then,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, apologies. Do we have any plans to collect other information or be like sales, like more reactive in reaching out to people? Or something to consider as a part of our strategy for just like determining square footage and usage?
Well, we've been working with this for a long time. but,
Yeah, absolutely.
We certainly could we may choose to send out another survey, maybe as we get a little farther along.
Okay.
And see what's going on.
Yeah.
The reason I brought this concert thing up is because the guy who sent it to us made a very good point in saying, if you want to get maximum use out of your facility, and it's flexible, then you could keep it busy more nights out of the year. And that certainly is a goal that we want to have, because if you keep it busy enough, maybe it will lose less money than we expect it to.
Yeah.
So, or maybe some year it might break even. It just depends on. So if you make it as flexible as you can, that would give us that opportunity. So I think he made some pretty good points along those lines. Just like we want to be able to use it for the occasional sporting event that fits there, doesn't want to go somewhere else or can't go somewhere else. The idea of a concert of that size wouldn't be bad either.
Yeah, I received the same email, and it was very well written.
You did, yeah.
Yeah, very well written, and made some great points.
Did he send it to all the committee? Maybe he did. I don't know. Okay. People,
Are you allowed to
You're
re-share
special.
that out? Can we share that?
I
with
can share it out to the committee. Sure.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. Hey, it came to me. It's a public record, so,
Yeah.
yeah. You shared it with me too, yeah.
Is there information on file related to the top 30 or 40 companies in the region and their potential utilization? And if not, is that something we should consider? I think about, Bell Bank or Sanford or Aldevron and others, being able to stay in the market and use a facility. I've heard a few times they weren't able to, so.
Absolutely. We think it should be, and we want to keep it affordable for local use as well, just as that's one thing we hear from St. Cloud and Rochester and other places. We could probably make more money, but we want to keep it. It's a public building. We want to keep it affordable for local use as well. So, and I've thrown out figures. I'm pretty adamant about something close to a 50,000 square foot room. What we need beyond that is probably up for debate as far as the breakout space goes, and then the pre-function space and the kitchen, which we'll get to in a moment here. Maybe it isn't 80,000 square feet of actual meeting space. Maybe it's 65 or 68,000 square feet of meeting space, as long as we have enough to handle the general session, the exhibit space, and enough breakout rooms, and then go from there. So I think that's one of the things we might want to put in as guidelines in the RFP going forward. Okay. So we have Jake Hughes and Dan Herder. They're caterers in town. You guys work together, but you got like 2 or 3 different companies, so I'm going to let you explain that. Would you like to maybe grab a chair, like maybe over there next to the mayor? Because I think that would be very appropriate. Don't worry, he won't stare at you, intimidate you. Don't worry. So we brought these guys here because we had a little discussion about the catering kitchen last week. Taylor offered some advice, and we thought we should get the people in here who actually do some of the work, so we have a better idea of what kind of square footage and what kind of equipment you need for various different uses of a kitchen in a facility like the one we're talking about. So, Dan, how do you feel about that?
Sure. So I'll give you a quick introduction for those that don't know me. My name is Dan Herder. We have 3 different catering brands in the region. Started with Chef's Table Catering out of the Sanctuary Event Center. Then we put a second kitchen in over at Brewhalla a couple of years ago. We have Brew Catering that is based out of the old food co-op over on NP and whatever that is, University. Jake runs that brand for us. And then we have Urban Foods Catering, which is out of the Armory over in Moorhead. So 4 kitchens total. I have some floor plans that I brought. I don't know if they're useful to anybody, but you can certainly pass them around. These are our existing kitchens today. Each one of them are between 15 and 1,800 square feet. 9 years ago when we got into the business, had I known that eventually we would need 4 kitchens, I don't know that I would have had 4 kitchens, maybe one bigger one, but this is where we are today. By our rough math, not rough math, we know what our capacity is. In each one of these kitchens, we can do about 1,000 people a day. That's really where we cut off and stopped taking bookings. So, Claire and I had a conversation previously on an estimate of 5,000 or 50,000 square feet. We figured you'd be talking somewhere in the 3,500 to 4,000 people range, max capacity. So I don't know if it's quite as simple as just multiplying by 4, but somewhere in that neighborhood of 9,000 to 13,000 square feet is kind of where we think you would land. For us, from an equipment perspective, we're not, there's more efficient equipment that utilizes less square footage than what we operate out of because we have 4 small kitchens instead of 1 mass kitchen that is producing mass quantities of food. So I'm not necessarily, one of these pages does have a list of equipment on it that you can take a look at, tiny print on the left. I'm not necessarily saying you'd end up with 8 double stack ovens when you're all said and done. There's probably more efficient solutions to that. That's not necessarily our expertise, but just strictly from a square footage perspective and what we serve, that's kind of the math I landed on.
Maybe you might have said this when I was looking down at your drawing here, but so if we're talking about different uses for these kinds of kitchens. For a building of this size, if we're going to have anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 or 3,500 people, does it need to be a kitchen where you do all the prep work, or is just a kitchen where you bring food in and keep it warm? And Phyllis, explain that a little bit more, please.
Realistically, right now, and we had this conversation prior to this meeting, I would argue that we are one of the larger caterers in the region at this point. I mean, Holiday Inn and MSUM and Concordia can certainly put out some volume as well, but I don't know that there's anybody that's equipped to actually cook for 4,000 people. We would have to have 0 other bookings that day in order to be able to do it as a company right now. So I think you probably need a facility on site to be able to produce that much food. It could be done, but it's going to be pretty limiting in scope as far as what you can offer. Types of food, styles of food, quality of food. I think you probably really need a kitchen on site.
So it depends on the size of event, really, but we would have to plan for the larger ones. Joe?
Well, just looking at the space here, if this is accurate, it's 1,500 to 1,900.
Yes,
Right.
Jake painstakingly measured all those
Yeah,
with
I
a
can
ruler
tell.
before we got
Excellent.
here.
Thinking about this new space, is there an idea around what that size needs to be? Or, I mean, if it's serving, 4,000, up to 3,500 to 4,000 people in one day, how does this compare to those numbers?
Like I said, for simple math, I think you take 4x and, somewhere in that neighborhood of 9 to 10,000 to 12 to 13. Some of that depends on other storage. We were having the conversation, if there's a lunch buffet for 4,000 people, how many chafing dishes does that require? Who owns those? Where are those stored? I mean, that's a storage closet in and of itself just to house all of the service equipment required for that. And is something that probably needs to be you need to be aware of, is I don't believe there's anybody in town that has an inventory. Like, nobody has 4,000 plates, so you probably need to own that. You need to own the forks, you need to own the chafing dishes and the serving utensils, unless it's an in-house contract, and then potentially somebody could gear up to that, but.
Okay. Paper plates?
That's an option. We prefer it.
Chinette? Okay. Yeah, so a lot of details to work out. And one thing I want to point out is I think we'll get different proposals for this, and it will kind of depend on which proposal we end up going with. I think I wouldn't be surprised if we get some proposals that say, we want to do the catering, or others that say, we don't, but there should be a kitchen in there. So, and again, I don't want to get people too excited in advance. We're not going to have a 3,000 person conference in this place every month.
Right.
At least not to begin with. But you do need to be ready for that, because ultimately it could happen. But also what could happen is you could have 2 500-person things going at the same time if it's designed properly, so you would need kitchen space for both of those. So different configurations, but you might get to that space pretty quickly, so. Mayor?
Would it be your sense that we'd have space available for a caterer to come in? I mean, it seems, on the issue we're out competitively doing other bidding, if we hired staff just to do catering for the convention center, they'd sit idle many times, right? So in a sense, would you sense that we would have space, utensils, things ready for your team to come in and do the serving? Because I think Charlie, right, if Chamber has an event and you have cold food, it ruins the event, right? I mean, the speakers may be lousy, people may be lousy, but if the food's okay, right, then it's a success, but isn't that critical to your convention in a sense?
Number one thing we get comments on is the food, so.
So wouldn't it make sense we'd have a space that somebody could use, but we may not necessarily have the staff, we would have, just to decrease our operating costs?
Yeah, and I think that the other thing I was going to ask is it's really also dependent upon if there is the attached hotel. What is the expectation of the hotel in providing food? Is it we've talked about this a little bit at the last meeting, is it an exclusive deal? Is there a preferred caterers list? What inventory does the hotel have versus, and that's the size, and what type of kitchen does the hotel have versus what, and then transporting obviously from a hotel or a feature and hotel area to the actual convention center. So I think those are all things too, but if that's not figured out ahead of time, then making sure there's ample space. I agree. The one thing we hear a lot is that we underestimate storage space capabilities and need for storage space. And that's everything from tables and chairs to actual, plates, and as Dan was saying. But I think that's the other thing, is to consider if it can be built to the fact that what you need is that we have to be able to accommodate 3,000 people, and we may have that be in 3 different events all at one time. And that's very, I think that's going to be very, very likely, right?
Yeah, we want to be ready for what we think the max could be in there. But you brought up a good point. It's going to vary depending on the different proposals we get, because we will leave that open to some degree. And if it's a hotel that wants to do all the catering, that's something we'll have to consider. We may choose to say we don't necessarily want to narrow it down to just one caterer, because we want the business to be available around the community. I'm not just saying that for your benefit because you're sitting there, but we do have other caterers in town who would be able to help. So I think but we need to be ready for whatever these different groups propose, and then ultimately negotiate it out with them if we find something we really like, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I will just make one point on allowing multiple caterers to service the facility does come with its own unique set of challenges. For instance, the fryers at the end of service need to be completely emptied and dumped. All of the spices and the seasonings, all that stuff that you keep in a kitchen that you use event after event after event, you're now hauling everything in, everything back out, unless it's some combination of what's stocked by the venue, what's not stocked. But minute details like the salt and pepper shakers for the tables, who fills those? Does the venue own them? Does the caterer need to have that? So there's just a lot of nuances there that gets complicated when you don't have the same person servicing it every time. Does this caterer leave it in the proper state when they're done? Do they clean properly? Who's enforcing that? Who's maintaining equipment? Who's responsible for servicing equipment? Just some other things to keep on the long list of things to think about.
So if you were, let's say we have this building and we've got like a 9,000 or 10,000 square foot kitchen, and you're going to do a 1,000-person event in there, would you prefer that all of the things be there, the plates, the silverware, and the salt and pepper shakers, and the glasses, and all that stuff? But if it's not, what do you do?
For us, we pull from every other venue that we work at if it's available and come up with 1,000 plates. But yes, it's much preferred if it's already on site.
Mm-hmm.
Most venues that we work with have the plates, the silverware on site. Just transport alone is very difficult for that type of stuff.
Yep.
And that adds considerable cost, correct?
Yep.
I mean, you factor that into how you bid that, what the cost is then to the end user. So that's another factor to think about.
Yeah, and just, I mean, for, you know, so then you scale up to 4,000, you know, 1,000 people we've done at the Air Museum, that's it's not easy, but we've done it before, but times 4, and all of a sudden you need a box truck just to transport the 4,000 plates and another box truck to transport the glassware. So I think it's probably pretty critical that that be on site. And like I said, nobody has that inventory right now, to my knowledge.
I was going to say, as it exists now, I mean, generally caterers are using a lot of box trucks to go around, whether you own it yourself or you have to rent it.
Right.
I mean, I see
Yep.
Concordia Caterers and other places, the Holland Inn Caterers. I've seen them as I've seen you working at the Air Museum and things like that, and yeah, they bring in big trucks and before the Air Museum added some more space, they really had to like bring a kitchen, you know, basically.
Yeah, and I can tell you, load in and load out at the Air Museum for a 1,000-person event is like a 2-day process. We're there a day ahead of time, bringing everything in that we need. We're there the next day or late into the night, getting everything out of there. But it's not a small feat to bring everything that you need for a nice event for a large amount of people.
And of course, you need dishwashers and stuff too, yeah.
If the location had, let's say, all of the plates and silverware, all of that, is there a way, I'm thinking also from a revenue standpoint, right? How you maintain revenue, is that something that you have somebody that could manage that inventory that could then also be rented out or leased out to other events, other caterers, other locations? I just think there are lots of other, if you have the inventory in place, how do you use that inventory and leverage it to the greatest extent? So that could just be another factor.
Commissioner?
This will be good to find out, what does St. Cloud do? What does Sioux Falls? Because I think that's a question. But the main thing is, if there's a hotel there, that changes it. But I think as a group, like with the Fargo Dome, when that was first built, we intentionally did not have a kitchen because we wanted to have it be positive for the surrounding restaurants. And so to me, that's part of our debate. Is that what we want? Do we want to be, because it will be competition and we just have to decide. And then the other one, just to add a little confusion to it, a liquor license, that's going to be something to consider as well.
What was the last thing you said?
The liquor license.
Oh, the liquor license. Oh, yeah. Oh, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But yes, it's going to be an issue. Yeah.
One of our
But
questions as well.
You can't, okay, as long as you brought that up. I mean, if the city owns the building, they can't own a liquor license, right?
That's correct.
So it would have to be, you'd have to have a caterer to do that.
But that's why this group, we have to debate, how do you want this to be? Do you want this to have, if there's a hotel connected to this convention center, do you want them to have the liquor license for the facility? This will impact their bid. And anyway, so it gets to be kind of confusing, but I do think that's why it's good we have all of us here, because there's a lot of questions that you, can I ask one dumb question? So there's different types of kitchens. There's catering kitchens versus full kitchens. Can you just talk, and what do you recommend as a professional that we put in there? Because it's quite a difference in the cost. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my recommendation is a fully functional prep kitchen, or a fully functional kitchen. It's got all the ovens, it's got the mixers, it's got the flat tops and the steamers. And like I said, simply because I would be concerned that you might not be able to find anyone to service this facility without the availability of that equipment. I don't think anybody has it right now.
On the liquor license question, you guys carry a liquor license with you wherever you go, right? I mean, you have the liquor license.
It's separate. We use the boiler room liquor permit, and we pull an E-permit every time we do a cater at a certain venue, which is an option. If a venue does not have a license, then you are allowed to use your E-permit and pull. So theoretically, whoever's catering the event, if they have access to a liquor license, could pull the permit, or the hotel could license it or do an E-permit type thing, but.
Right.
But Charlie, this will impact whoever are the RFPs. This will be a significant financial piece of the puzzle.
Yep.
And so if we dedicate the liquor license and it's theirs, the hotels and the convention center, that's a big deal. And
Yeah,
so
it is.
that's something for us to consider. The caterers would much rather prefer and most of the bars would like to have it be independent. But if we decide to do that, this will be a very big financial piece to the puzzle for the people that we give the bid to. That's just my prediction. And so I think that's why all of us, we need to consider that.
Maybe you
And
can-
I apologize for making it more confusing.
No, it's good. This is all going to come up, So we should maybe lobby the legislature, so maybe the city could own the license. And I know that's another story. It's like,
Charlie, when you start getting into lobbying, you let me know how that goes, because that's.
oh, I know how it's going to go. Yeah. Yeah, I'm still working on the daylight savings time thing.
But I think, Charlie, so to Commissioner Popcorn's comment, if that is written in, it's going to, I was thinking about this as I was talking to a couple of developers, just about the potential of having a hotel and what their bid would look like. And when they ask the questions of where is the revenue component for the developers, they're really looking at it, that's obviously the hotel itself, but we know food and beverage is a big deal. That's where a lot of the money is to be made. And so to your point, I think we're going to have to, I don't know that we'll be able to put out an RFP that says, you can propose if you want the liquor or you don't want the liquor, or you want the food or you don't want the food. I think you have to put some parameters that are going to allow us to be able to make that decisions, but that's just my thought.
Can I just add, and I apologize, but the Fargo Dome, back when it first started, they made a conscious effort. Like I said, they did not want to have food provided because they wanted to have it be by the existing businesses. But this is obviously a different situation. So, but I just think we have to be aware of that. What we decide is going to affect the liquor license holders in our area and the food, the caterers in our area. So however we do it, we have to consider that. Thanks.
Yeah, it's one of those things that obviously we won't decide today, but I think I feel like it'll end up being something that's negotiated at the tail end of the process. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, if we narrow this down, get a bunch of bids, we narrow this down to 2 or 3 or 4, and then we'd start looking at how that works and what can be done to make it work. Right, Michael? Okay. Anything else? Kitchen related, food related? Theoretically, if you built, thinking in terms of costs, right? Because we don't have unlimited funds to build this building, which I am reminded of daily when I think about it. Too bad. But anyway, it's something we'll have to think about. But I think the bottom line is, first we need to at least make sure there's enough space and enough power in that room and enough, plumbing in that room to do what you would want to do. Even if you have to put off adding some of the equipment later, it could be something that is built out in phases. But the key would be having enough space. So again, to reiterate, you're thinking of anywhere from 9 to 12 or 13,000 square feet to handle one big one or multiple smaller ones?
Yeah, I think that however you fill the room, it could be 10 different 400-person events or one big 4,000-person event, but I think that's about your capacity mark there. Just a quick note, I meant to bring it with me, but I forgot. I do have a contact for a kitchen designer out of Minneapolis that I got referred by a contractor. We're going to start later this year on a development for a much larger commercial kitchen for our companies that we can work out of collectively. And so Colonex does a little bit of like kitchen layout and stuff locally, but I think these guys are a little bit more about flow through and traffic and functionality and how that all works. So I'll get that over to Claire and she can share that with the group. But to that note, we are kind of in the real early stages of design on this, but learning a lot quickly and exploring a lot with some of this higher capacity kitchen equipment and larger format type stuff. So, happy to circle back on it later with some of the things we've learned. And I'm probably going to work with this group as well and at least get their opinions on some things. So,
well, anything on that you're willing to share would be great.
Yep.
As we continue this process. Okay. Any other comments or questions about catering, kitchens, food space right now? Liquor licenses? I don't know what I'm saying.
I just have a couple thoughts just on everything that was talked about. I think Dan nailed the square footage there from everything that I researched on that. The one thing is we're probably going to want a centrally located catering kitchen, which might not be connected to that hotel bar kitchen. They operate kind of differently, right? So you think maybe 10,000 square feet. I came up, if you do like a preferred vendor list, we're going to have more people in there. You're going to have separated areas for, storage, stuff like that. You're going to need more space closer to that 10. If you have just the one in-house, like if the hotel did it, you could go down to 8, 7, and maybe operate that. The kitchen for the hotel, I'm guessing you're looking around 3,500 to 5,000 square feet for that whole restaurant space, where probably 1,200 of that, 1,500 of that will be for that kitchen.
Yeah,
I
so
don't think
you're
that they
saying,
would be together.
yeah,
They would be separate.
they would be separate,
Yep.
yeah. Good point, yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to do, we started our catering world trying to cater out of restaurant kitchens, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Unfortunately, nobody wants food at noon on Tuesday. They all want Saturday at 6, so.
Just as a gross question in a sense, if you look at profitability off an event, food versus liquor, what percentage would be the liquor?
Liquor, if you just take straight cost off the top, I mean, depends on what you're selling the drinks for, but 25% is kind of a general margin, 25%. Of course, when you go to the Fargo Dome and drink a $9, $10, $11 beer, whatever they cost, they're running a much better margin, but I'm guessing there's a commission that goes to the venue and then, of course, staff to pay for and things like that. So yeah, I think, I mean, in that $5, $6, $7 price range for a drink, you're making a pretty good margin before you have to pay anybody else anything.
Well, yeah, and I think you would always, as the Fargo Dome does, right, you would want a commission for the facility, even though, so you could make some money off it, even though you can't own the license and make the whole profit. That's, most venues operate that way, right?
Dan, how would that look for you guys? So let's say that if the hotel owned the liquor license and operated the beverage portion of the events, for that, then that keeps the revenue there. You know, if you're talking about having a vendor come in to do food, where I think it'd be smart to take like a fee for using the kitchen, stuff like that, right? But otherwise you lose out on a lot of that revenue of the food. How does that affect you guys if you didn't have to worry about the beverage portion? Because then that would allow the hotel to operate all the beverage, keep all those alcohol sales from there, and then you guys do the food.
Yeah, most venues we cater at have their own liquor license, so we don't do that a whole lot. Every once in a while, we'll go somewhere that doesn't, and we'll pull the permit. And, you know, to that effect, I mean, whether it's a kitchen rental fee or a percentage of sales or whatever, I heard you mention other revenue opportunities, but, I mean, most venues that we cater at take a cut of our sales, and that's certainly an approach that can be done. And then the other opportunity, or the other option, you know, when you explore some of the bigger companies like the Sodexos of the world, they really just do a management fee, and then effectively everything's running through the conference center, and you just have somebody that's managing that whole thing for you. That's another option. Then you're keeping some of the revenue and paying out a portion. It's really reverse commission, but a few different ways you can achieve that. But yeah, I don't think liquor is critical to the food piece. Of course, we'd love the opportunity to have it, but
Right.
It would not deter us from doing just the food
Got
side
it.
of it.
I do have 3 spaces that we can check out too, that operate on that same model. So Boston Convention Center, they use a preferred catering. Music City Center in Nashville, they use a hybrid where they have the in-house, which would be, you know, like the hotel, and then external vendors can operate there as well. And then Walter E. Washington Convention Center uses preferred catering as well, and then they take a fee. So different ones that we could reach out to and see how that works with them.
Thanks for looking into that. Could you like email the group a little rundown of that for us?
Yep.
That would be great. Thank you. That'd be helpful. Okay. Any other food or beverage talk? Claire? No? Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. We appreciate it. We may call you back sometime when we get farther down the road here.
Sounds good.
But I think we got the space idea pretty well in hand.
May I jump in?
Yes,
For the-
please do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a little bit more about that landing page that is in the works. We've put together kind of a quick outline. So we're obviously like the purpose of our group, the members that are on the committee. I'll have a section for document sharing. So information, you know, that you just had referenced, or Dan, things that would be helpful for remembering those facts about square footage for the kitchen, agendas, comp set, so sharing the information that Charlie had about different venues in our region, and there's floor plans. I'm also working on creating an FAQ and glossary because a lot of these words and terms are new to maybe some of us. So if you're ever confused, shoot me a message and I will add that to the list. And then open meeting laws and best practices for that. And then any links that we're going to be sharing to other venues and things. And the last but not least is upcoming events for us, or upcoming meetings, just a calendar, which kind of transitions into our travel dates.
Right. So we've been talking to, I was at the Explore Minnesota Tourism Conference this week, and I got a chance to meet face-to-face with my counterpart in Rochester. We were talking to them about the week of March 24th as a possibility. They can handle either the Monday, Tuesday, 24th, 25th, or the Thursday, Friday. My counterpart in St. Cloud is happy to meet with us on the first day of either of those things, but we have to set up the convention center separately because it's operated on its own, and I have reached out to the contact there, but I've not heard back from them yet. So hopefully that. Do you do work in St. Cloud? Yeah.
Yep.
Rich,
I know those folks well. I can reach out if you'd like.
maybe I'll enlist your help a little bit later. If I don't hear from him by Monday, I'll probably reach out to you. The theory, my thinking is it's a one night overnight. So if we can leave, let's say we go Monday, Tuesday, 24th, 25th. We'd leave from our visitor center, lots of parking out there. We'll get a bus. We'll cover the bus. Don't worry. Right, Claire? Yeah. Okay. Claire's one of my bosses, so I suppose I should look at her. Yeah. No, we'll take care of that and hotel rooms. But the idea is we would go. Ideally, we'd go leave like 8 or 8:30 in the morning, get to St. Cloud, have some lunch, meet with the convention visitors people there, Rachel Thompson, and then hopefully in the afternoon go tour and ask questions of that facility, and then mid-afternoon, we get on the bus, head to Rochester, have dinner, stay overnight, and then the next morning, we would do the same thing with Rochester. Do the tour, meet with the operators, ask them all the questions we have, and then head home in the afternoon. So we'd be home probably early evening, I would hope. Of course, all of this is weather permitting in March, but that's what we're shooting for, so I may reach out to you. So questions about that? I fully understand that not everybody would be able to go, but hopefully as many of you as possible can go on that trip and see what's going on in those communities.
If there's any opportunity for us to do it at the front half of the week, we do have our Night Bazaar Galactic Rodeo on Thursday, in addition to our annual event, which I can confirm majority of over half of this room is invited to. So
On Thursday of that week?
On Thursday of that week. So if there's any chance that that's a possibility,
Okay.
it would be greatly appreciated. But I understand with
So we'll
scheduling,
do it.
not the
So now
case.
we'll measure, so who would rather it was on on
do
Thursday? See,
apologize.
that's what's, yeah, no, we will certainly try.
Yes,
It'll-
if there's any opportunity.
It'll
that'd be
depend on the St. Cloud people. The
Yeah.
Rochester people are good either way, so.
Yeah. it's good to see.
Yeah, I mean, even if for some reason they don't want to tour us through the convention facility there, I think it would still be good for us to stop and talk to Rachel and her staff because they sell a lot of the stuff that goes on in there. But I'm hoping we'll be able to get in there, and I bet you can help. Okay. Okay. Those were the primary things we want to talk about today. The kitchen aspect, I know we only have an hour, so we got 15 minutes left. So if anybody wants to talk a little bit more about the meeting room space or any other issues you want to bring up today. I know that Jim is already started working on the RFP, so we're going to try to give him some numbers to plug in there. I'm sorry, Mayor, you wanted to say something?
Well, you said other concepts, so just the question, a lot of times it seems to me buildings like this put a stage in or put permanent structures in that cost a lot of money. But I've noticed you've gone to empty building and put up stages, put up what you want. Mics are better, audio is better, a lot of stuff is better now. Do we have to have like some permanency of the stage sometime? Could you have a more flexible structure and space, to the Charlie's point, multifunctional?
Yep.
And to me, a lot of times, you like to have a head table where you'll see people, but it seems to me a lot of times you waste a lot of space having quote a stage.
Spot
So
on.
is there something to have flexibility and just build it into portability?
Absolutely. And the greatest successes that we have from an event production standpoint are really a big room, lots of steel in the ceiling, great power, great back of house loading dock facility, short push to the room. So what I mean by that is really the permanent stage element in the vast majority of the conferences, conventions that we do doesn't exist. We bring in the stage, we bring in the production, we bring in the drape, we create the look in the space. And as I was mentioning earlier, that gives us the freedom then to orient that room however we see fit, right? Maybe we only have a 50-person event. Great, we'll be in this section of the space today. And maybe tomorrow we have a 1,000-person event. Now we open up the air walls and we have whole run of the room then for that group. So I think having, flexibility in what we're calling this multi-purpose space is key here for all the different types of events that we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a couple key things. Flexibility of space, you bring the stage, or we have temporary staging that can be set up, whatever works out. But power is a key thing, and you have to take that into account when you're talking about how the room's going to be divided. So if you want it on both ends, and also if you're going to divide it in half again, you need enough power. Do you feel like you need grid space, or would you just want to be able to hang grids?
I don't know that we need what we would consider to be like a theatrical grid proper, if you will. In black box theater spaces or auditoriums, you'll often have pipe grids that are in the ceiling. That would not be a need here. Again, examples like Bismarck Event Center or the Alaris Center, even regionally speaking here, or St. Cloud or Rochester, we really have quite strong ceiling beams, right? So steel beams in the ceiling that are the support for the facility itself, but that are rated 3 or 4 times the building's weight, or weight rating for snow rating, if you will, in order to be able to hang, say, stage lighting or drape or any number of other elements, depending on the type of event need.
Yeah.
So
It has to be sturdy.
Correct. Yep.
Have to have power on the ceiling.
Yep. And there's a specific, set of calculations out there for that exact type of usage, but it's very, very common. And it's true across all the facilities that we're discussing here in the region too.
So
The concern,
go ahead.
concern is like, we put these video boards in this room, and they're already having to be replaced. My idea in the old days is you bought this thing as 20 years, I don't have to worry about it.
Right.
But the new modalities is oftentimes, and as commissioners, we know this, we got to replace or put back things in this thing. And I see perfectly well, but apparently it's obsolete. My concern is that.
I think that's planned. Yeah.
My concern is we put a brand new convention center in and buy great equipment that's obsolete in 4 or 5 years, in which if we're portable, you buy the equipment and just place it in the space, right? And I don't know, Shannon, in your events, right? I mean, it's critical to have these videos so people can see stuff, but, right, how much do you want to put in hardware and how much do you want to have the flexibility? And too, your venues are all mixed, 300 people, 500 people, 1,000 people, but it's all different, right? I mean,
Yeah, for sure, the flexibility part of it. We set staging very differently. Sometimes you want it in the rounds, sometimes you want it front of the room. So, yeah, I think that Kent's right on that. I think the consideration besides the rigging and structural part of it is really, if it is going to be an option for concerts, then the sound component of it is what's really going to be a big factor, right? How are we making sure that the sound is able to handle a concert type of a venue?
And
right?
that's an acoustics conversation for sure, and that could very easily be included in the RFP overall on sort of a general basis. Anticipate that this will be conferences, concerts, corporate events, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and we should not have, an acoustics issue overall in any of these spaces to speak of. Still, in most of these cases that we're discussing, concerts, conventions, conferences, otherwise, you're going to have a lot of folks that have either their own preferred AV provider that want to come in, right? That's what we do on a national basis. They take us with them, our clients take us with them, if you will. Building in AV into especially a main room or multi-purpose large space like we're discussing for what we would consider to be general sessions or galas or conferences, what have you, is going to limit us more than anything else as I see it from here. So we want to be able to accommodate as many of these folks as we possibly can as we start to get these inquiries for different events. And they may have their own provider, and I think that's great. Bring them in. Let's go. We want to book the business in the space. Where I would say there is a call for AV, and this doesn't need to be a right now conversation, is what you were mentioning earlier in the meeting rooms, right? So breakout spaces, in other words, yeah, throw a projector and a screen in and have a basic sound system in there. That makes sense for everybody. That's a quick turnkey element that anybody can utilize. But
And
in the
again,
general-
that can be managed either by the staff managing the convention center. You can also have that be in the contractual with the hotel provider, that they have the AV equipment for the meeting rooms separate from what you may in the larger space. So whoever wants to manage and I agree, the big part of that is that allow for, to make sure that we're flexible with the end user and who's booking the space with us, to allow them to bring in their own AV provider if so needed, but then have a preferred list of our locals, obviously, that we love, right, Ken? So.
Yeah, I think flexibility is key. I mean, I think we're always going to default to wanting to be able to work with as many community partners as we can, not necessarily just say only Livewire. I mean, you don't have that many competitors right in town right now, but you have a couple. And I think you don't want to necessarily make it look like you're completely favoring one particular thing. And that's where that comes up with the kitchen, that comes up with the catering, comes up with the AV and all that stuff. So is it old style to call it AV? Am I dating myself? It's still AV,
Spot on,
right?
still AV.
Audio visual, isn't it?
Still
Okay.
AV, oh yeah.
I date myself many different ways, but that's just one.
I got a couple of questions. So the meeting rooms, so how many square feet are you projecting for meeting rooms?
So we need anywhere from 6 to 12. Some people say as many as 18, but I think 6 to 12 meeting rooms of varying sizes. So I think we're looking at least 10,000 to 20,000 total square feet, somewhere in that neighborhood.
I would beg for 8 to 12 meeting rooms. There's quite a lot of them that specifically want 8. The thing is obviously you can, just like the multifunction space, you can have breakout rooms that also break into smaller spaces.
But like how many thousand square feet for all those combined? I guess that's my,
That was what you just said.
I say, yeah, 10 to 20. I say minimum of 10, probably a minimum of 12,000 square feet.
okay.
Anywhere from there up to 20,000. So
Okay.
if we're going to have that and plus a 50,000 square foot room, we're technically looking at anywhere from 60 to 70,000 square feet of meeting space.
Okay.
That
And as
does
Susan
not
will-
take into account the catering kitchen or the pre-function space or the storage.
As Susan will testify, bathrooms is a really big deal.
I've heard
And
that.
so the square footage of all the rooms, you have to make sure that you have the adequate number of restroom facilities.
Yeah.
And that's a very important thing. So anyway,
Especially women's.
and this is,
I don't know the square footage of each one though, so
and this might seem dumb, but also, are you going to have a coat check? Are you going to have a place for people to, so all those kinds of things, I think you got to at least think about because.
Just that list of things that we had on the agenda, like this, that would be the support, right? The support, the back of the house, the storage, those types of things. One thing that I thought of, the pre-function and hallway space, when you're considering a convention center, that hallway is typically used for more than just motion in between room to room, right? You can have different types of like mixing and, like receptions and registration. There's a lot of purposes for that space. I did find rule of thumb that when you're calculating a hallway, you typically want to do 20 to 30% of your total usage of square footage. But I think it would be on the higher end because of having that, wider space for pre-function space.
Just one other word of caution with the Fargo Dome, when we have we have a meeting room on the second floor there, the fire department required to have access, there's a separate hallway, but it's not included in the public space. But you have to pay for it, it's construction, but I don't know if you remember that, Susan, but so there's a separate hallway just for fire access and safety, but it's not included in the square footage. And so all those kinds of things, I think you have to be careful of because you still have to pay to build them, and it still has to be heated and all those kinds of things.
As a quick point on that too, for the sake of the RFP and how we describe that, one thing that, and Shannon brought this up a little bit ago too, we really lack in storage space at different venues in town here. This is a frequent issue that I run into, right? There's not room to store tables or chairs or even our own cases. They go back on the truck, that type of thing, right? True for catering folks too. I know that's absolutely the case more often than not. So I think we could basically summarize this for the sake of the RFP. We have adequate service hallway access to all of the meeting room spaces, so back of house access to everything, right? We have great egress through that same hallway, right? And fire access, so on and so forth, potentially, and storage, right? Let's build all that together, potentially right alongside the catering kitchen. This can be done really efficiently, but kind of to Commissioner Pepcorn's point, in some cases it hasn't been, and that's had to be an add-on or afterthought.
So just out of curiosity, is that 30% kind of capture what Kent just said? I mean, if we're talking 70,000, you got 30%
Yep,
of
okay,
that,
so
now you're at
this was just
21,
something
not counting the kitchen. All told, this is
It's
probably 120,
total
130.
usable space, so it would be back of house included.
Okay.
Charlie, could your company, our company you're working with, just give us a rough blueprint or something that kind of bears these things in just for the staff or for us to understand it? Because like Dave's commenting, bathrooms are going to be somewhere, anti-spaces will be somewhere, storage will be somewhere.
Yeah.
There's kind of a rough draft somebody could do that helps us, because a lot of us are visual. I don't know.
Sure,
if you
yeah,
know.
yeah. I'll probably, yeah, I'll probably check with HVS on that, see if they can provide us with something. Yeah.
Or
Or
even,
examples.
or even if we can, if we're using the St. Cloud, Rochester, or other
Mm-hmm.
models, ask for their blueprints to then ask some of this same square footage. If we
Right.
could ask for the breakdown in some of this, that gives us, if we could have 3 samples of that, that would give us 3
Yeah.
really great pieces that we could say, okay, here's the average of that back of house storage space. Here's the average of that. So instead of creating, I'd hate to see us put a lot of work into putting something together that,
Right.
we know may come in very differently without hindering creative licensure of those that are bidding, but take those that we have, if they're already going to be our models, can we
That'd
use
be,
that?
yeah, that'd be a lot cheaper than hiring a company to do it. Good point. And the layouts that you'll see once we get them up on our website of these buildings only are about the meeting spaces. So we'll have to talk to them about getting a more detailed drawing of what actually goes into the back of house stuff.
I'll take a look in our records too. We may have some larger blueprints overall to some of these facilities. So if so, I'll send them over.
Even if their square footage is different, the proportionate layout, that we could start to
Right.
see some of that, so.
Yeah, be helpful. Okay.
I have one final question. I'll make it quick. So I see some of our developers in the room. I might be putting the cart before the horse and getting a little excited, but do we have a current list of developers who will be receiving the RFP, or who's putting that list together? Jim?
We do not have a currently curated list of developers, but that's a pretty short list that we could compile for perhaps the next meeting, if that sounds reasonable.
I think Charlie's been in touch with some people too, so we'll
Yeah.
have him keep that list. But yeah, we can.
And I think we could
File a
find
list.
places that people go to look for those things, even ones that we haven't heard from or thought of in the past. So I think we want to do a pretty broad, cast a big net.
I do.
Yeah, I would agree. That's the part I was going to ask, because I'm sure there are, if you look at developers that specifically do this work, and where do they look for those RFPs? How do we get them into the hands there? And then also, obviously, the local developers that have the ability to.
Oh,
do
yeah.
that as well.
They'll tell us where they look. Right? Yeah.
Final question. I'm not entirely familiar with this process. I've never been a part of this before, but I'm super grateful to be here. Is there any potential that we can get like a timeline from now to May of like what we hope to accomplish, just in guiding, like knowing how to prep for meetings or what we're working on kind of week to week? Because I want to make sure I come in educated on certain topics and have all the information that I can provide in that moment, if that's possible. Again,
Sure.
what the general
A lot
timeline of this is, but
A lot of the stuff you see on this agenda,
Yeah.
you're going to see again.
Okay. It's
but
kinda like the
maybe
general-
With subheadings,
Okay.
yes. But if we're going to do a specific topic, we certainly will try
Yeah.
to let you know at least a few days ahead of time.
yeah, or like knowing when certain things have to be decided by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would be just like a nice kind of guiding map, I think.
Okay.
Charlie, real quick, we got 6 seconds. There's a meeting next week with the Economic Development Incentive Committee, and seeing the agenda, there's an item on beginning discussions for this project. Can we just make sure people are aware of that?
Yeah, Jim told me about that. Yep.
I kind of mentioned it at the last meeting, whether or not the city be willing to, give some property tax incentives or really try to capture the benefit of a hotel to help take that money and enhance this facility. And so that's one of the things we'll talk about, whether or not, for instance, we may not want to give any incentive for the hotel because that should really kind of carry itself. But the new property taxes from it, we could possibly capture that and help with maybe some outside facilities, maybe something with the convention center itself because we know the budget's always real tough.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. It'll be an interesting discussion. That's on the 25th? Okay,
25th is this room, 1 o'clock.
okay. I'll be here. All right, thanks, everybody. Meeting adjourned. Have a good weekend.